Greetings, fledglings. Welcome back to my chambers of art and wisdom. I've heard some of you had an interesting discussion about the king last night. And by interesting, I mean that our tavern keeper surely is as happy as your masters about his destroyed interior. Maybe you should choose a better place for your passionate arguments next time, like the arena of the Dumai. Now, you were not sent to me to be scolded again. Instead, I will settle your disagreement for you. A little bird told me the first mug was thrown in anger when someone asserted that our beloved king maybe wasn't always the brave, cold-hearted warrior as we know him today. Well, that's true. We all were human once, and no human is born with the inner strength of his caliber. No, to achieve such calmness, almost indifference in the face of danger and hopelessness, you have to pay a price. Let me explain. If we want to understand how our king came to be as ruthless as he is now, we have to take a look at the place where he was born. Many of you may already know that Kain grew up in the town of Coorhagen in the far north of Nosgoth, but you probably don't know much about the town itself as it was back then. Coorhagen was founded by Kain's ancestor, Lord Abel, later Lord Coorhagen, a knight of Willendorf, the former capital city of Nosgoth. He was given a stretch of land by his king for his loyalty and bravery in battle, and settled down as far away from the royal court as he could. Under Sir Abel's wise and just rule, Coorhagen became soon a prosperous, lively town. But politics are everywhere, and when the old lord of the manor passed away and his son became the new Lord Coorhagen, several families of the lower nobility rose to power in town. The new lord had to face a broad variety of intrigues and other amusing issues, but in the end Coorhagen remained under his control, even though the town reminded me always of a snake pit ever since. However, generations later, when King Ottmar of Willendorf sat on the lion throne of Nosgoth, the political bond between Coorhagen and the crown was still unbroken. Remember this for later. Now that we know the shape of the snake pit, the manifold nature of this noble town, we should look at Kain's upbringing. As the son and only heir of a lord, he received an extensive education in literature, music, dance, poetry, mathematics, history, heraldry, and politics, and I really can't say what bored him the most. After the age of 7, he was also trained in hunting and horse riding, and swordsmanship later on. He had to learn fast. By the age of 15, he had already survived 2 attempts of murder on his life. After a childhood in a web of intrigues, corruption, and blades in the dark, you might think you know the cause of his cold-hearted behavior by now. You are wrong. I don't know if it was thanks to his father's guidance and unswerving loyalty to his people, or his mother's soft influence and love, but against all odds, Kain did not become as vicious as the rest of Coorhagen's nobility. He despised his enemies with righteous anger, but he knew better than let himself be blinded by rage. A blind wolf is easy to catch, even for a snake. It needed much more to break him. So much more. To say Kain was a young man when King Ottmar sent a message to Coorhagen would be exaggerated. Nosgoth was at war with a land in the far east, beyond the mountains and the wide grassland. If you ever go there yourself, you will see that there's not much more than a desert. The land greets you with icy cold nights, strong winds, and miles after miles of glistening dunes under the moonlight. During daytime, the sun scorches the sand, making this region almost uninhabitable for humans and vampires alike. If you must know, the Razilim are the only clan right now which is allowed to travel the eastern desert due to their swift wings. And yes, the king wasn't in the happiest mood when Lord Raziel decided that he wants to see the desert for himself. Back to our topic. King Ottmar felt deeply insulted by the ruler of the east because some stray desert vagabonds ransacked a village between the grassland and the mountains, technically on Nosgoth territory, and the queen of the east didn't do much about it. So King Ottmar thought it would be a good idea to handle the matter himself and sent a group of soldiers there. The Queen heard about a battalion of heavily armed Nosgothian men at the border of her land, and the rest is human history. This fatal misunderstanding led to the Desert War, and Lord Coorhagen and his son rushed to aid the troops of the king, just as Ottmar has ordered. The war was short, brutal, and pointless. Who didn't die under the desert sun died on the way back when Ottmar's army was forced to retreat. Only 12 months later, the final battle took place at the grasslands near the border. Kain's father died. And Kain himself? He didn't leave this battlefield for a long time, even when his feet somehow found their way back home. Humans are not made for war. They are not supposed to kill. Not in the same way we are. Of course, there are humans which enjoy battle and bloodshed, but war is so much more than this. It's darker, dirtier, and uglier than most souls can stand. May the Lords forgive me for my words, but there is no honor on a battlefield, not if humans are involved. Kain had seen his father die, his friends, his foes, civilians too, men, women, children, strangers with wide, tearful eyes, darkened by fear, hands raised in their hopeless attempt to defend themselves and their loved ones. It was back then when he realized that the creatures of his homeland, vampires and other beings of the night, are by far not the worst monsters around. In the meantime, King Ottmar, who had never set foot on the battlefield himself, gave up on his war against the Desert Queen. He didn't call his soldiers to arms again since then, except for defending Nosgoth against the Legion of the Nemesis years later. But this is a different story. After his return to Coorhagen, Kain stayed for a couple of years in his hometown to fulfill his role as lord, but his days were dark and empty. He could no longer pretend to be on the moral high ground, way above the town's spiteful nobility. When his mother married again, he left Coorhagen for a few days, returned, stayed for the same amount of time, and left again. What started as short day trips became soon a matter of weeks and finally months, while the Legion of the Nemesis rose in the north, another, much more real threat to King Ottmar and his crown. Kain learned a lot during his travels, about Nosgoth, about its people, and with every new journey, every new town or city, every new encounter, his anger grew. Wherever he went, he saw injustice and violence, arrogance and indifference. One fateful night, he was around 30 years old, the Lord of Coorhagen did not return home. He wasn't even surprised that his mortal existence was ended by the blade of an assassin, or that he died alone in the mud of a lonesome road. Neither was he surprised by the flaming abyss opening before his eyes while the world of the living faded away. The anger in his heart turned into hatred, burning even hotter than the flames of hell. Hatred for his murderers, for the people he had sworn to protect, for kings and lords and the chains around his soul holding him back. He was only surprised when he realized that he had company in hell. At one point, during his journey to eliminate the corrupted Circle of Nine, Kain returned home, just to find the town under the reign of a new ruler. Death had taken his toll on the people of Coorhagen, and the plague was the judge who rendered his judgment upon them. In the end, the snakes, venomous and deadly, died from a much stronger poison. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was Nosgoth itself, raging in pain, which unleashed the plague to purge the town. Kain was satisfied. This was not what he had in mind, but it was quite effective. The stench of the rotten bodies filled the air. Coorhagen, the proud town of his forefathers, was nothing more than a graveyard. And so he left. He did not search for his mother and her husband. Probably it was better this way. Now you know much more about your cold-hearted king, don't you? But is there anything left of him of the nobleman he was, you may ask? A tiny rest of former chivalry, perhaps? A glimpse of a kinder man? buried under a millennium of tyranny and sorrow? If there is something left, then it's the fact that Kain values loyalty more than anything else in the world. And the most loyal may receive something like kindness. Well, are there any further questions before we finish our list for tonight? Yes, young one. How I come to know about all this? What Kain did? What he thought and felt? Who do you think told me all of this? You may now leave, dear fledglings, and please refrain from another fight in the tavern for the next couple of nights. Our tavern keeper will be thankful. Good night.